Joining us right now is Halima Croft, RBC Capital Markets Managing Director and Global Head of Commodity Strategy, also a CNBC contributor. And Halima, we've been watching these oil prices picking up. We know it's because of the extended cuts Saudi Arabia's made. Is there any chance that they're going to rethink things, or is this just what makes sense for Saudi Arabia?
I mean, the Saudis have been very clear since June when they did the unilateral million-barrel-a-day cut. They were going to be very focused on trying to stave off all these macro concerns about China, hard landing, recession, that were dragging oil prices down. And so what we saw this week was the Saudis were like, look, we're going to extend this million-barrel-a-day unilateral cut through end of December alongside the 2 million barrel a day OPEC cut. Now, what is also driving prices higher, though, we've had massive inventory draws. Look at the draw we had last week in the United States. Demand has held up stronger than anticipated. The sum of all fears on the macro front is abating right now when it comes to when we look at the fundamental outlook for oil.
So we had thought that oil prices were going to be higher. We've kind of dodged that bullet. It's been the one area where inflation hasn't been really rampant. Are you thinking that we are in for higher prices for an extended period of time?
I mean, the challenge for the Biden administration right now is they do not have up their sleeve probably another blockbuster SPR release. And so they are having to rely on energy diplomacy. And you mentioned the G20. The question is, can President Biden try to secure additional oil relief from the Saudis as part of this mega deal that has been in the works? Negotiations have been ongoing for several months about a deal that would include Israel normalization, assistance for the Saudi civilian nuclear program, new security guarantees for Saudi Arabia. Can they get this mega deal across the finish line? And would it include some form of oil relief?
And what do you think the answer is?
I mean, I think it's challenging. I think it's going to be challenging to sell this to Democrats in Congress. But the Biden administration, they've sent Jake Sullivan there. Brett McGurk is there this week. And so they've been working very hard to get this across the finish line. They believe that it's worth putting in the diplomatic effort to try to get this major reset with Saudi Arabia.
So watching, again, what's happening with the supply-demand picture, we know the supply picture is going to be tighter unless a deal like this goes through. What's a little less clear is the demand picture. Obviously, there have been pressure on this because of the waning demand from China, expectations of a slower economy there. What do you hear from people in the markets right now, just in terms of how big of a factor that is?
I mean, the China concerns are absolutely weighing on prices. I mean, the economic data from China has been disappointing. But what's interesting, Becky, is when you dig into the oil data has been quite constructive. June was a monster month for Chinese imports. If you look at July, softer, but August numbers were solid in terms of Chinese oil imports. And refinery utilization numbers have been solid in China as well. And so we've had this bit of a disconnect between the broader macro data in China and the oil import data. So again, if you look at the actual demand data, it looks quite constructive for this year. And another concerning point for the markets, Becky, is what's happening on the product side. We have significant deficits when it comes to products. Look at the run-up in diesel prices and look what we are in terms of refinery capacity. There's no SPR for refinery capacity. And that is also pushing prices higher. The product story is incredibly important.
Halima, I don't know if you're in Texas right now, but I do know that the state's power grid operator put on emergency operations on Wednesday evening again. Just concerned that they're not going to have enough power for everybody in the state, asking people if they've got backup generators to run those. What's the situation with the power grid in Texas?
I mean, this is another concerning situation, Becky. We're there again in terms of asking Texas consumers to conserve energy. I mean, the question is, are we going to have brownouts? This is an ongoing story about the state of the grid infrastructure in the United States. So everyone will be watching what's happening in Texas very closely.